In this video I'm creating the household for the Gothic subculture. I chose to picture myself how I see the Gothic aesthetic core, which I for myself called Classic Goth for the purpose of this video, so in the future can look into more type of Gothic styles. I have always really liked the Goth styles. It's elegant, romantic, androgynous, it's Victorian, Edwardian, Belle Epoque and dark. So that's the foundations of the style I'm going after, while also looking for some stuff to add that would enhance the look, such as chains and a bit of a vampire-inspired theme, while not going totally overboard. I will also say that I'm by no means an expert on the topic here, so please enlighten me. And it's for sure a bit tricky to find the clothes and looks I'm picturing in my head, since I'm also restricted to what the game offers and what can be found as CCs. Speaking of custom content, there are by miles more female clothes than for males, which makes it even trickier, but the CCs I have found are incredible. When I create characters and builds of a certain style, subculture and so on, it is my take on the style. That means that I don't aim for recreation. See it more as an augmented style, which sometimes remain true to the specific style for a specific time period, and sometimes not. And also, sorry for all the scrolling through the clothes. I got totally confused with my footage when I was cutting, so there's a little bit too much of repetitive content here, I believe. When I think of the goth aesthetics, I think more of the late 90s and early 2000s. Back then, at least in Sweden, it wasn't uncommon to see goths, and I think it's gotten more and more rare, unfortunately, after about 2010 or 2015 or so. But also back then, rock and metal was such more common to hear. There were festivals and so many bands and subgenres emerging. Now it seems more secluded into a few social groups, more than an open style, or how to say. The Gothic style also, both historically speaking and referential-wise, developed even more subcategories of goth styles, fusions and core styles, I believe. I don't think we would see witchcore and so on if we wouldn't first have had the Gothic aesthetics. And here you can see a very cool coat, which I think would have suited very well for the goth style. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a way how to recolor it, but it had to do. So a little bit of history about the goths. Tracing the goths' stylistic origins is an interesting topic. One could argue that it is true that the Gothic style derived from punk during the 70s, in the same way that the rock derived from blues. But the blending of styles made rock, which in a way developed into metal, made metal reference more to the Renaissance and other cultures more than to blues or rock itself. But one could also argue that it was more of a re-emergence of the Gothic culture and style, that on one hand traces back to medieval Europe. Then it was first used as a pejorative against this kind of art and architectural movement. But more on the architectural notes for my upcoming house building video for the goths. But I quickly also want to say that the critics of the Gothic art itself leads the style even further back in time, to the migration period, or perhaps even earlier, since the critics referenced the art stylistic elements to that of the goths, hence the name. So, the Northern Germanic tribe, probably hailing from either Götaland in Sweden or from Gotland, the largest island of Sweden, where I also lived for 11 years. And by the way, I think I named this character Göte, which is a Nordic kind of name, which for sure makes me think of the goths. You have Göteborg, Gothenburg, for example, which has a name Göte in it. A bit derpy, maybe. It's usually older people in Sweden that would be called Göte, and I would have liked a more, I don't know, more Gothic kind of name. Maybe I should have taken like these Gothic tribe leaders. What are they called? Like Beric or something. Later, you'll see Victoria. Or apparently she's on the screen right now. Which is the other part of this household. I thought of that name because, well, it's a reference to the Victorian era. I think it is for sure an interesting note that Wilhelm Worringer writes in The Form of the Gothic, where he brings up the topic of psychological roots, and that the medieval Gothic style had this kind of reference back to the Gothic and Northern people in the sense of psyche and desires. I think it's interesting for sure, since he wrote the book in 1911, and to see how about 80 or 90 years later, how the culture would even more, I would argue, reminiscence of this kind of psyche. And noteworthy for me here is that you can also take this kind of thinking into the subculture of today. I mean, why would the Gothic movement of the medieval and Renaissance be something of the past? While today's Gothic subculture lends many references to the actual style and psychological ties. Sometimes I think it's more important to see that some cultures are very much more alive than we on the surface think they are, and that they are still developing. I haven't really decided yet about how their house would look like, so we'll see about that. But I do think that the aesthetics of their clothing looks pretty okay. I mean, quality-wise, the CC looks amazing. Maybe I'm probably not as happy with the male character as for the female though, and I would really have liked for his everyday clothes or his usual clothes to be this more dark goth kind of coat aesthetic, but I also really wanted that red rose on his shirt. And it was around here I did some very weird thing with the footage. I'm cutting in DaVinci and for some reason had overlapped some clips, so the clip underneath, the one I inserted on the wrong place, it got deleted. There is probably a way to get it back without like Control Z, but I haven't figured out how yet. Since the Gothic style continued into the Renaissance, I think the art style for the clothes are a reference to historical times as well. The type of classical Goth style I'm going after seems to sometimes be called New Romance. What I'm not so sure about is how this type of style developed into the dark and black aesthetic. But I could guess that it is more related to the early kind of 70s Goth music, which also had a dark aesthetic. And that this kind of music developed more and more into darker fantasy, which tied this style to get inspiration and influences from other dark arts and literature. If someone has more specific details here, please fill me in so I don't speculate too much. But talking about music and so, I don't know if they all fit on the Gothic, but some bands I want to mention here that I think are great would be Tribulation, Evanescence, Hymn, Epica, Therion, Apocalyptica, Death Stars, and the Birthday Massacre. These are all great bands. I would argue that Gothic metal is a kind of goth music, perhaps not so strong ties to the 70s punkish, but definitely references the medieval aesthetic itself, and probably in that psychological sense too. And also I probably blend too much of the different Gothic styles here, but for some reason I get a bit tired when I'm going through all the options here, like what they're going to use for school, for example, or whatever. And I'm not even going to school since they are adults. I use that more of a like a random slot. Also, these characters probably don't like going swimming, so I thought they should probably wear like as hardcore as they could going into Gothic styles instead. But also these sunglasses are pretty cool, and they go very well with the Gothic aesthetics. I know it's more of like a fusion of Gothic steampunk or Gothic like 19th century style, which it's a Gothic style for sure, so. Creating this household was a bit tedious since the mod struggled in Inzoi, and for some reason all my clothes choices disappeared when I saved the characters. So I will see if I can figure out, and hopefully find a way I can upload the characters to Canvas. Anyhow, what do you think about these goth characters? See ya!